So, welcome back. As many of you know, last time we covered the Player 30 ARG, but I fell asleep and seemed to have fallen into some purgatory of my own creation. Don't know how, but I probably did something stupid. Anyway, what to do now? Well, I guess we could cover the Sandman. The Sandman is the second entry into the Strange Man series after the Crooked Man. If you haven't already, check out my video on the Crooked Man if you want some extra context, but it's not necessary if you want to enjoy this one. I seriously recommend it though. This was a recommendation from Gundam B, longtime viewer and recommender. Another good suggestion. And if you guys want a game to pop up, suggest it. It's not a guarantee it'll come up, but this guy's recommended a lot of games and I think 3 of them have showed up so far, so yeah. Also, I vaguely remember saying something about how stupid I was considering the walkthrough for the Crooked Man was nearly 2 hours, but my playthrough was 4 hours. Yeah, as you can see, this one took a bit longer. And just before we get into it, I'd like to thank you all for watching and say thank you for 600 subscribers. That's a really big jump. And I left out a community post, but I know everyone won't see it. So if you see this video, well, if you have any suggestions, put them down below. I will say I sway my opinion more towards free games. And if it's an ARG, please leave the link to the ARG or a video from it, not just the name, because there's 2 people in a different community post who recommended 2 ARGs, but I couldn't find them, and one of them I'm pretty sure was a prank. But without any further ado, let me tell you the story of Sophie and the Sandman. We get the first big scare in the game when we wake up as a redhead. Our main character is a teenage girl named Sophie who gets her uniform on to get ready for school. Walking into the kitchen, we can find a note from our father who tells us that he left some money and to lock the doors and leave the stove off. He also says that Sister Mary had called saying that we had done something and tell her that he's too busy to talk to her. In school, we see Sophie sitting alone in class while a blonde girl named Reagan comes up to us and teases her about her red hair. Soon the next scary element comes in when a nun walks in and calls Sophie, giving us her last name, Grundler. Sophie gets tripped by Reagan on the way out but gives no response, stoic as ever. So not only is she being bullied, but it seems that this is an all-girls Catholic school. Scary. As Sophie leaves to meet the sister, a girl named Annie comes out and says how brave Sophie is, and we learn she's our best friend. Sophie goes to Sister Mary's office, and Sister Mary compliments Sophie, saying she's done better on her exams and is a model student by being so calm. Sister Mary also asks about their last conversation, which Sophie can't seem to remember. Sister Mary reminds her that it was about her lack of sleep, and Sophie apologizes for forgetting, saying she's been spacing out lately. Sophie starts talking more about her insomnia, claiming it's been 10 days with little to no sleep. Sister Mary said she needs to go to the hospital, and Sophie declines, saying she doesn't want to worry her father about the money. Sophie then starts to leave, and the sister gives a last suggestion about praying before she sleeps. Sophie leaves, and we fast forward to a sermon. Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul? To those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? Forsighting has become my daily food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. Job was a man, honest and adorning justice. But as we all know, that does not ensure disaster will not befall us, yes? Through calamity, he saw the truth that not everything can go swimmingly. Though you may be too young to have such experience, trust in the ways of the Lord and endure your hardship, just as the Son of God had faith in man and bore suffering. That is what gives us greater merit. So ends the sermon. For those interested, that passage was Job 3:20-26. Before we go back to the story, I'd like to explain this passage a bit more, because it'll relate to some other stuff later. But the next passage of this text talks about how Job wishes to curse the day he was born so that the earth would turn dark and God would stop caring. Talking about waiting for the daylight that will never come and rousing a great Leviathan. Now in the Crooked Man video, I mentioned the poem it came from, being the Crooked Man. But the Sandman's poem will actually be less of a focal point, and actually more important as to why the poem is not important for this story. This story focuses mostly in the beginning, on the biblical story of Job, which I think is much more fitting, which we'll see later. Back to the story of the Sandman. Sophie tries to sleep using prayers, but it doesn't work. She wakes up later that night and notices her clock is stopped at midnight. Something feels off to her. Sophie goes outside and sees a man asleep on the floor. Going into her neighbor's apartment, there's a woman passed out on the floor there too, unable to wake up. Sophie goes outside her apartment building and sees even more people sleeping on the floor outside. She wonders if anyone else is awake, and then we're allowed to explore the town to look for more people. You can explore a lot of the map, and it's actually really nice, and gives you the ability to explore areas you'll need to use later. Not like my sense of remembering was good for getting to places anyway, but it's very nice. In some buildings you can enter, like the library, you can find some odd wisps. There's a restaurant you can enter as you watch a dust cloud leave to another room. Going to the library, you can find an open book on the floor. The vengeance of hell boils in my heart. Death and despair flame about me. If Sarastro does not through you feel the pain of death, then you will be my daughter nevermore. Disowned may you be forever. Abandoned may you be forever. Destroyed be forever all the bonds of nature. If not through you, Sarastro becomes pale. Hear, gods of revenge, hear a mother's oath. Sophie thinks about the story and remembers it as the magic flute. Going off track again, this is also a real thing. It seems to be an orchestral performance mixed with a play, and I haven't watched or read it, so yeah. It seems to be something about a mother and some sort of revenge. Also, one last thing before we get back to it, the magic flute, or the website I found mentioning something about it, the Queen of the Night, who asks Prince Tamino to save her daughter from Sarastro's evil hands, and Sarastro seems to be misunderstood as evil, just something I'd like to leave as a pin. Going to the central fountain, Sophie senses a dark figure behind her. But it turns out to be her friend David. Hey, this guy looks familiar. Wonder why? David says he was pulling overtime and noticed everyone asleep, then went to see if Sophie was okay. Both of them have no clue what happened, but they want to go check to see if anyone else is awake. Then Sophie remembers her friend Annie in the school, and so she says she'll check on her without David. Since he's a guy, and it's, an all-girls Catholic school. David tells her to meet at the park when she's done and wishes her luck, telling him to stay safe. Then he leaves. I wonder what that achievement could be in reference to. Okay, sorry, I promise that'll be the last instance of me plugging it. Maybe. Sophie goes to the school, but it's locked, so she needs to find something to get over the giant goddamn wall that surrounds the school. Sophie goes to find a tool shed in an apartment complex and finds a shed with a ladder. And a barrel of guns, that, of course, we don't get to use. After using the ladder to vault the wall, there's a small shovel that can be found in the garden bed. That shovel can then be used to put a hole through the doors and get in. Walking in, there's a bulletin board where you can find job 42-4. You said, "Listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me." Sophie goes to the dorms to find Annie, but she's not there, so she decides to check the chapel. Going into the chapel, there's a Bible with a bookmark in it. Like a slave longing for the evening shadows, or a hired laborer waiting to be paid. So I've been allotted months of futility and nights of Can you stop crying in the corner, please? Thank you, just trying to read. Where was I? Ah, yes. And nights of misery have been assigned to me when I lie down and think, how long before I get up? The night drags on and I toss and turn until dawn. Job 7-2-4. Oh, yeah, hey, it's Annie. Sophie tries to assure her that she'll be fine, but she refuses to go before they will chase her again. Then she follows Sophie and we see Annie get cornered by red figures.
Where are you going, you Miss Liar?
Annie cries for help as they berate her and call her a liar while teleporting away. You need to then track her down in under 3 minutes. I actually really like this timed event because the figures constantly lie or just say random things to throw you off her trail. All the doors are open and most of the rooms are empty, but they may have the red figures lying to you. You can find her in the lunchroom area by going into the kitchen and pushing a box of fruits aside to get into the back room, where she is cornered by the red figures. Finding her, they continue to berate her, saying she needs to disappear and that she's a liar. Upon them noticing you, they disappear and Annie is still cowering in fear. Another red figure appears and disappears, calling Annie a liar. She explodes with emotion and pushes Sophie aside, just wanting to go home. Sophie then dismissively says she should just forget about Annie and leave her to cower in her own fear. After leaving the school, we flash back to Sophie tutoring Annie, where Annie praises Sophie, calling her brave and smart. She admires her for being able to stand up to the bullies, saying she'd never be able to do the same and she's too afraid to help when they bully her. Then we cut back to the playground where David and Sophie meet up. David says he found nothing, and Sophie expresses her frustration with the Annie incident. She talks about the strange red shadows, and David says he hasn't seen anything weird. David, however, seems confused but not alarmed and says they should just keep looking. They have another disagreement about splitting up, but David caves quickly and allows her to check the mall while he checks the west end of the city. Going to the Bloomberg Mall, the door is locked, but there's a panel next to it that you can use a security code to open it with. So you can look around until you get to the bank and see a security car right outside. Getting into the car, there is a passed out security guard. Taking his card, you can use it for this really neat puzzle on the security panel. You need to align the letters and numbers on the panel to the letters and row on the card. Getting in, there's a small doll on the escalator that scares Sophie half to hell, but it's just a doll that makes noise when touched. Picking up the doll, Sophie goes up and hears what sounds like a gunshot. She continues on to the top floor with the movie theater and goes into the open theater on the right that has soldiers seated while a general displays a hostage tied to a pole. That hostage being Reagan. And this kind of looks like a scene out of Inglourious Bastards. But the general says to meet back in 30 minutes and not allow anyone in or out of the mall. Sophie quickly hides behind the ticket desk and she thinks of a way to save Reagan. She sneaks to the back where she can enter the theater and tells Reagan to be quiet while she unties her. But the ropes are too thick. Sophie sneaks back to the ticket office where she finds clippers and cuts Reagan's ropes. Sneaking back to the ticket office, Reagan collapses and starts bawling her eyes out, wishing they could be safe and wondering why they would kill her. She claims she doesn't know how she got here, but that she must have been kidnapped, saying she'll have her mom sue them since they marched into her mall. Sophie tries to tell Reagan they need to leave, but Reagan gets into a fit, saying she won't leave and that Sophie needs to shut up and not order her around, that her mom will save her. Then we flash back to Sophie and Reagan in kindergarten. Sophie tells her not to cry and mentions how her mom was killed by a man named Bang Krober. She says if she doesn't want to be a crybaby, she needs to stop crying and play with her. Sophie then calls Reagan a crybaby, yelling at her that she can't do anything herself. Reagan attempts to stand up to her, but Sophie continues to yell, saying she's useless and her bullying is just to take out her stress because she can't do anything without her mom. Reagan tries to call jealousy and say that they are completely different, that Sophie's mom died and her dad abandoned her, and that Sophie is jealous because no one loves her. Reagan realizes what she said and tries to apologize, but Sophie gives up and asks Reagan if she's just going to wait for the soldiers to kill her or come with her. She tells her it doesn't matter if she comes, but she's leaving. So Reagan reluctantly agrees and they need to figure out a plan. So Sophie walks and a box falls on her, sparking an idea. Reagan is now in your party and you can use the box to hide from patrolling soldiers, but you need to be hidden and not moving for it to work. So, you need to Metal Gear Solid style sneak through enemy soldiers to avoid death by firing squad. This segment is actually pretty fun, and I enjoyed it. But at the last level there are just too many guards to sneak by. So, Sophie chucks the doll into a corner as a distraction. They run, but Reagan trips, alerting the guards. They run outside and escape the troops, only to see that all the troops are watching from the windows. They run even further until Sophie realizes that Reagan has disappeared, likely left behind. So, she just decides that she'll have David help her find Reagan later. Meeting David in the park again, she details what happened in the mall. Sophie then starts to feel tired, and David tells her to take a break and slowly explain it from the beginning. They talk a bit more, and David tries reassuring her that it'll all end out fine, and that she needs to stop pushing herself so hard. Then we get a flashback to when Sophie met David. Annie tells Sophie that they should have lunch together, but Sophie lost her wallet with the $5 in it. Then Reagan makes a loud indirect remark about finding $5, saying some idiot must have left it. Annie offers to pay for Sophie, but she denies it. Sophie later regrets not taking on Annie's offer, but goes to an ice cream shop for a scoop. Leaving the store, she bumps into David, who apologizes profusely for bumping into her and offers to repay for the dropped ice cream. He takes her to a cake shop where he treats her, and she feels so overwhelmed with joy that she cries. David listens to her problems and reassures her, and they talk. Later, David and Sophie are leaving the store, and he promises that if she ever needs him again, they can meet up and talk, as he doesn't live far. Then we flash forward to the present where Sophie remarks how lots of people suffer, and that she doesn't want to be the one who whines and cries about life because she can forget about the bad things with time. She says that the situation now is more important, and they need to focus and figure it out. Then David remarks about Sophie's father leaving her to find him. She goes to his work, but it's locked, so we need to find a keycard. Luckily, the employee of the month on the front poster is sleeping in the subway tunnel. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I used a tutorial here, and I have actually no clue how you even supposed to do this puzzle, because I cheesed it. But the code is 120000 on the subway gate to get him, and his keycard. If anyone would mind commenting how you do it, I'll pin the comment or something, I don't know. You can go into the security office on the first floor and find that many of the rooms are electronically locked after 10 p.m. unless someone asked for them to stay open. Asset management, where Sophie's dad works, is open, so she goes upstairs to find her dad's office and finds his desk. His desk has a picture of her from kindergarten on it, and she flashes back to her and her dad at home. She's excited to show her dad a picture she drew and tell him about how her and Reagan and some other girls were looking for chupacabras. She then says that her dad should come to the south with her to look for more chupacabras, but he apologizes and says that he's too busy with work so they can't go on a vacation for quite a while. She whines that she wants to go looking tomorrow, so he promises her they can go this weekend to look for chupacabras, asking her to wait till then. She says hooray, but then asks if he had drank any juice. No, I didn't drink any juice. Nuh-uh, you got tomato juice on your mouth. Huh? Then we can see Sophie, her aunt, and uncle in the hospital. Sophie's aunt is talking about how stubborn her father was with how he was juggling a kid and difficult work. The uncle responds by saying he can't take Sophie in because he has 2 kids of his own, but that he might be able to recommend a place. Sophie calls her auntie asking if her dad's stomach is hurt, and the aunt responds with it's because he worked so hard. She asks if her papa will die, and her aunt quickly assures her that he won't. She tells her to be a good kid and not to worry about her papa. Then we see Sophie in her dad's hospital room. I'm sorry, Papa. I got all selfish and made you worry. I won't be selfish anymore. Nuh-uh. I won't ask for ice cream before bed. I'll eat my broccoli and liver and onion. And I won't cry when you're not there. I'll learn to sleep on my own at night, so please, get better soon, Papa. Ew, they eat liver and onion. Might be British. With that, we go to find Sophie's father. She goes to the top floor and finds a meeting room unlocked. Her father rushes from a door and yells at her that it's dangerous. Just when he's about to explain, a dragon bursts through the wall and sets the place on fire. Sophie and her father need to avoid the flames in the hallways, so they rush downstairs and escape. There's actually a really neat part to this. The first stair down, you could just turn left and get to the door quicker, but if you do that, the dragon will burst through the floor and create rubble in the way so you can't get past it, forcing you to go the long way anyway. But after they get to the bottom floor, Sophie's dad trips and she yells for him to run, but she gets pushed out of the building. She then runs in only to find her papa gone, the doors closed, and the dragon gone. It's a dream. This has to be a dream. I'm having an awful nightmare because I can't explain it. Red shadows, weird soldiers, a fire-breathing dragon? Let me wake up. I don't even want to sleep. If this is some kind of dream I'll have, and if I can't wake up, then help. Please, somebody help. David, help. Trying to get back in is futile, as you seem to have dropped the keycard on your way down. Leaving the building, Sophie can find a tooth that got knocked out when she fell on the ground. Going to the fountain, you can see a tail of a creature go by, and Sophie sees a dark figure attached to that tail. Following it, she gets led to an apartment building, where she finds a couch with a blanket over it. Then she goes to the central fountain where David is waiting. Did you find your father, Sophie? I did, but he's gone. Gone? What do you mean? You got separated? Something like that. I see. Sorry I couldn't find your friends. I wonder where they could be. I searched the town over again, but I haven't found anyone awake. No choice but to look harder, I guess. Let's go, Sophie. We have to find your father and friends. Just who are you? Huh? What do you mean, Sophie? Why this all of a sudden? Who am I? David, of course. Liar! Because David is in that apartment. He's asleep, so who are you? I'm not saying what you mean here. I'm me. Don't go asking me who I am. Sheesh. First of all, you say I was sleeping there? Let's say it's true. Why wouldn't that one be the fake? Because he's not. Because you already lied to me. That alone tells me I can't trust you. Lied? What lie? When did I lie? Stay away. Don't get any closer. Who the hell are you? Why do you look like David? Oh boy. Looks like you got me. Jeez. Wasn't my fault at least. I'm sure it was his interference. Sheesh, what a pain in the neck. Did you do this? Did you put the town to sleep? Wasn't me. It was the Sandman. Sandman? You mean the fairy who... Yeah, you know him, don't you? Uses sleeping sand to put humans to sleep. Well, he put all the humans in the world to sleep forever. Do you think I'm stupid? The Sandman put the whole world to sleep? As if fairies actually existed. Oh, now you can't believe it? After seeing shadows, soldiers, fire-breathing dragons? How do you know about the dragon? I didn't tell you that yet. Because it was me. If I keep doing this, the video will go on for ages, but the reason why this conversation is so important is because Lullaby, the one disguised as David, is effectively Sophie's inner conscience. He is doing all this because, deep down, it's what Sophie wanted. He describes how the Sandman made time stop and the world go to sleep for his plan, but the problem was people like Sophie. Insomniacs. People who were too sad, angry, or uneasy, or impatient to sleep. Each one gets his or her own lullaby to get them to rest their issues and fall asleep. The one flaw in their design is that they can't disobey their insomniac. So when Sophie wants to go see the Sandman to reverse this, Lullaby must comply. And we meet again! Welcome to the fairy dimension of spirits, sprites, and more. Sophie is transported alone, and must follow the path in this winding liminal world. The trees bear no leaves, and the sparse plants are unnatural to her. Some with incredibly bright color, others plain as the ground. Some paths also lead back to where she already is, so she needs to follow the right path to find the Sandman. After following the path for a while, you can find an empty castle, and going past it, you can find a marsh where you can hear beautiful singing. Walking by, a figure leaps out from the water attempting to grab Sophie. Leaping back, just out of its range, we can see that it's a siren-like creature, a woman from the marsh attempting to catch a man with her song. She complains that it's just a little girl and not a handsome man, and introduces herself as Nixie. She won't let Sophie through her swamp unless she can get a shiny coin. Going back into the castle, another fairy pops out of the wall with awfully British-looking teeth. He looks like he has Mountain Dew mouth. I don't recommend looking that one up, by the way. Finding out it's the Tooth Fairy, she asks him if she can get a coin for her tooth that came out earlier. But he refuses to take it because it's an adult tooth, not a little kid's tooth. Going back to Nixie, she talks about her skincare routine living in a swamp and how she looks so young. She mentions Tibian grass in the forest and how it's great for making her skin look good, and that it has light blue petals, with its age-reversing effects. Backtracking to said plant, you can rub the tooth on it to make it a baby tooth. Giving it to the Tooth Fairy, he'll give you a coin which you can give to Nixie to pass. Passing here, you can go to this field full of bright fairies and a log that, when walking into it, makes you as tall as the grass. Just up ahead is a cave that's too dark to enter, a very small castle, and past that, a small pond. Going back to that shrinking log, you can use it to enter the tiny castle, and here, we enter the Sandman's castle. It's possible to look around the entrance. There's a sitting room, a slime room, a clock room, a room with a dinner table, and a room with portraits of children lining the walls. One of them being Sophie. But it's in a language we can't understand, so we don't know what the writing under their portraits say. But we'll get back to this area later. Going up the main hallway, there's a room with brightly colored tiles. It's kind of like that one tile puzzle from Undertale, but reaching the end, there's a button to turn the tiles off, and you can see a black and white poster on the wall with a red cross over what looks like either a horse or a wolf. But going through the next door, there's a long corridor with 2 locked doors. Going to one at the end, it's locked, so Sophie tries to leave, when all of a sudden, a figure opens the door. A short-robed figure with beady eyes, a nightcap, long beard, and a spoon. Sophie then recounts the terrifying story of the Sandman, and how he spoons out the eyes of children who don't go to sleep. Remembering this story her mother told her and seeing the Sandman, holding a spoon, rightfully scares her. So she runs away. The Sandman gives chase, and there's a dust cloud preventing Sophie from leaving. So she gets captured. She gets taken to the dining room with disgusting-looking food like a bowl of soup with eyeballs and dust clouds saying she should eat. Sophie continually refuses to eat it, which is the best choice, because eating it will poison you. The Sandman then gets up from his chair, talks to one of the dust clouds, and leaves. Sophie can now go up and talk to the dust. She finds out that they are the servants of the Sandman who help clean the house and spread the dust around the world that he scatters so people can sleep. Going back to the long corridor, Sophie can enter a new area. The door to the left has a notice that you can pull down, but can't read, and 2 empty candles. The room to the right has a lab-like area, which we'll see later. Going further, there's a hall of fire-breathing statues that you need to pass to make it to the room with an emerald flame in it. The flame doesn't burn Sophie, and it's beautiful, but there's a lever on the wall. Pulling this lever will lower the fire into a pit and turn off the fire-breathing statues from the last room. In the next room, there's an invisible maze which you can get through and end up in a medicine room. There's a jar with some red liquid in it that you can use to retrace your steps in the invisible maze to find your way next time. And trust me, it's helpful. The door to the left of the small medicine room is locked, so Sophie attempts to the bottom door. The door slowly creaks open as we see the red, beady eyes of the Sandman poke out. Sophie runs through the maze and tricks the Sandman to fall into the emerald fire pit, like Tom and Jerry style. Going back, Sophie can enter the bottom room and find machines and a world map. The dust in the room say how this is where the Sandman spreads the sleeping dust. Sophie can also find a cracked hand mirror on a table that doesn't give a reflection. That's a surprise tool that'll help us later, as the dust explains it can lead you to different rooms. Going further, Sophie can find a room of mirrors. I actually love this puzzle because you need to press the opposite keys to move. W is down, S is forward, etc. After that, Sophie makes her way to the tea room, where she can find Lullaby, still appearing as David. He says he's been waiting for the Sandman for tea time, but he's just so busy all the time. He offers Sophie a spot of tea, but she refuses. Ever the focused protagonist. Going into the next room, there's a statue, bucket of water, and a locked door. Trying to leave proves fruitless, as the door is now locked. The statue starts singing a lullaby, and Sophie needs to try doing things to avoid falling to sleep, like screaming out a window, pushing the statue, splashing water on her face, and even trying to bang her head on the statue. Because, well, what wakes you up more than a concussion? Inevitably, she can't move, and Lullaby comes in to bring her back out. Lullaby offers a solution if Sophie wants to stop the Sandman, by showing Sophie someone Sandman hates. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess. But before Lullaby leaves, he calls Sophie cute, which she dwells on that for a moment. Leaving the castle, Sophie goes to a mini pond on the right and finds a black unicorn. The unicorn makes a deal with Sophie that because he loves cute girls like her, he'll help her if she can get him a pink stone that the Sandman hides. And if she fails, he'll run her through with his horn. Toodles! Sophie needs to run back into the castle to find the orb, and she's got no clue where it could be. Going into the entrance on the right room, you can find a dust cloud trying to fix a painting, and there's gemstones behind it. Bingo. But you can't pull them out. Going back to the medicine room, the left door is locked with similar gemstones in the wall, but not in the same order. I recommend going back down and taking a picture of it so you can remember the pattern, but going up to the door you can take the gems out and reorder them properly. Doing so, you open the sand storage room. There's sacks on the walls and shelves lined full of sand. There's also a stick propped up against the wall, and we can take that. But then we hear the Sandman coming, so we need to hide. Going under the shelf with the door slightly ajar, we can successfully hide from the Sandman, even though our red hair is poking out. After he's gone, we breathe a sigh of relief until we realize we're not alone in the closet. He left. Good, he didn't see me.
Hi there, sweetie.
After hearing that, we can't go back into the closet, but those gnarly green fingers with their sharp talons were enough to kill my curiosity. But we can go back to the left corner of the room and find a sack that we can use later. Leaving, we can go into the invisible maze and break into part of the invisible wall that shields the ladder in the top middle of the room. Going in there is a room full of jewels, and coincidentally, a pink spherical jewel just like the unicorn asked for. But if you go out and give it to him, he'll actually impale you. But what you really need to do is wash the jewel in a bucket of water to find out that it's not pink, but clear. Then there's some machine in the back part of the room, and you can take a notice that's next to the machine. Taking the notice to Lullaby, he'll translate it for you. It says that it's a jewel extraction machine, and it can be placed on someone's head to get a jewel from them. Placing the contraption on her head, Sophie successfully creates a pink jewel, and can take it out to the unicorn. Now this is a crucial point in the story, because you can make a choice. In giving the unicorn the jewel you made, you can either let him keep it, or you can take it back. If you want to play the game for yourself and experience all the endings for yourself, my best advice is to make 4 extra saves. 2 where you take the jewel, and 2 where you let him keep it. Trust me, it's not too hard to do all 4 of them from here. The thing is that some parts of the story change depending on what you choose, so we'll go assuming you keep the jewel. We're going to do bad endings first. But no matter what you choose, the unicorn gives you a limp stone. This stone, when touched, makes someone limp, but she can't just pick it up, so she gets it in a bag. The unicorn suggests she go to the dwarf to craft it into something that she can use. He lives in the dark cave on the left. Going up to the cave, it's too dark to get inside, so the dwarf tells us to get the bird cage off to the side and fill it with light spirits so we can see. So you quickly do that, and we'll see that... Sorry, I wasn't expecting you to be... terrifying. Going in, the dwarf wonders how the unicorn got such a valuable stone, but it's no problem for him to make it into something. And while he's at the furnace, he starts a conversation. Say, Sophie, not liking it much in the human world, are you? How'd you know that? I just know. Fairies know everything about humans. Yeah, it's no fun at all. Nothing goes my way. I just hate all of it. At school, and with my friend, and with my dad, and with the guy I like. Now we get a flashback showing Sophie noticing David on the street with another woman. She hides and eavesdrops on their conversation, and as she listens to them, she realizes he's just that nice to everyone, and that her love is likely unrequited. This gets confirmed later, but it's pretty heartbreaking to see Sophie be just so unfortunate. We go back to the dwarf cave where she talks more about her crush and how he was her first crush and so special to her. But she doesn't believe she was special to him. Then she feels an immense amount of guilt for the lullaby doing horrible things which she didn't know that she subconsciously wanted. Dwarf then chimes in that he saw a unicorn get stuck in a mire, a part of the swamp. He had laughed a lot over it. Dwarf says that you have to allow yourself some thoughts, because it doesn't make her a bad kid. He says that she shouldn't go blaming herself for things like that. Then he remarks that getting back at what peeves you is fine. Just putting up with stuff is something that adults do. Dwarf finishes the craft and he makes it into a beautiful wand. And then he asks to feel Sophie's hands, and remarks how pretty they are and how he believes Sophie's eyes must be just as pretty. Sophie then realizes that Dwarf is blind. He says the darkness doesn't really bother him, as fairies are hard workers to a fault. The Tooth Fairy's teeth are rotten, Nixie's skin is in constant need of maintenance, and the Sandman is always sleep-deprived. He then tells the story of his father, who overworked himself so bad that he collapsed and got a hole in his stomach from overworking, telling her to take care of her dad, as he's the only one she's got. He also says that he'll pray for her. Interesting word of choice. Sophie re-enters the Sandman's castle, and his eyes glow red with rage as he runs out and pushes Sophie aside. Going into the corridor with the once flaming breathing statues, Sophie can find a dust cloud that's stuck... How? Fine, I'll roll with it. Even though that makes literally no sense, she helps it by propping the statue up with a stick. It offers you the Sandman's translation glasses so you can read the notes yourself. Looking at a memo you previously got, it gives you the recipe for sleeping sand. I'm not going to explain it in detail because the video's probably long enough already, and trust me, there's much more to come. After making the sand in an honestly really neat minigame, you can put it in the sack from earlier. Oh, also you needed to find this one pit in the map room that has the key to open the sand making room that was behind the door of the statue keeping room. Yeah. But one other thing we can see now is the room of faces of children. You can read them all, and the messages give the name and then compliments for the children from the Sandman. Some about kids' beauty, or their ability for kindness, or showing his love in any way possible. And then we get to Sophie's plaque. Sophie Grundler, your mother was cheerful and bright as the sun, and you'll surely be a wonderful woman yourself. Giving and receiving love, may you spread your wings. You can also find Nixie and the Tooth Fairy in the tea room talking about how much fun the fairy world is and how nice Sandman is. We can then go back to the Emerald Flame room and lift the lever. As long as you read the notice from earlier, you will know to use the green flame to open the secret chamber, that chamber being the Sandman's room. The room has his bed, a painter's kit, a telescope for viewing the world, and a diary. The Sandman's diaries display him complaining about the lack of sleep he gets, but he's still happy that he can give the world such a blessing of sleep. Although he complains about the meddling unicorn while still doting on Sophie and hoping that he can properly send her to Dreamland. Depending on what ending you're going for, Sophie will either be angry or empathetic with his diary entries. In some cases, she complains, believing that the Sandman is very selfish and should just suck it up and deal with it instead of putting people to sleep forever. In others, she's more empathetic to the Sandman's condition, seeing herself in his shoes a bit. In some of the better endings, Sophie even stops glaring at Lullaby and has a slightly brighter aura from what the fairies say. Interesting, as Lullaby, depending on your ending, is either in his true form of a blue translucent being or still David. No matter the ending, the next part is the same. Lullaby tells you he saw Sandman in the corridor as the Sandman left a letter for you written in English. The letter says he hopes he can help you get to sleep and to meet him on the roof. Going up these very OSHA-safe stairs, we meet him for hopefully the last time. In a fight that looks a little bit more like a disappointing Harry Potter fight, we use our magic wand to fight the Sandman's magic. In defeating him, we have 10 seconds. You can either hit him one last time or hit him with the fairy dust. For the 4 endings, 2 require you to hit him and the other 2 require you to dust him. But let's go from the bad endings first. Taking the jewel for yourself from earlier and hitting the Sandman one final time leads to the Sandman shattering to pieces. Lullaby comes by, appearing as David, and brings you back home. But no one will wake up, and time won't go. Sophie then tries to go to bed, but hears scary noises in her closet. And this is the sleep with one eye open ending. The next is where you keep the jewel and choose to dust the Sandman. Lullaby comes in as David again, and he says that the Sandman may sleep for centuries. But Sophie doesn't want to go back home, and just wants to stay with Lullaby. She hates humans, and just wants him. And he warns her about staying with him, but says he must fulfill her wish. An undisclosed amount of time later, we see the Tooth Fairy chasing the unicorn, and the unicorn runs into the field with the Light Fairies. The unicorn notices Lullaby sitting on a stump and talks with him, saying that he'll go to the Sandman's castle. Lullaby remarks that fairies always make their own fun, and asks Sophie if she thinks so too. And then we hear childish laughter among the Light Fairies. The invisible sweetheart ending. The next ending has you giving the jewel to the unicorn and killing the Sandman. In this ending, she starts by saying how it must be hard to sleep and how she's been suffering the same way. She apologizes that she can't understand and that this is all she can do. If you kill the Sandman, we then get this interesting sequence. She falls to her knees, crying about what she did to the Sandman, but then she changes her attitude. She starts justifying her killing of Sandman by saying, it's because he put humans to sleep forever, because he was so selfish, so I haven't done anything wrong. I've done nothing wrong. It's always been like that. I do nothing wrong but put up with so much. That's what irritates me, makes me sleepless. Yes, it's all their fault. She then demands Lullaby to sing her a lullaby and complete her demands. We then flash forward. We see a shadowy figure on the stool in the Sandman's room looking back at Earth. She's become a darker person by having clearly a lack of empathy and an angry aura. This is her revenge. The Queen of the Night ending. And our last ending, by giving the unicorn the jewel and sprinkling the sand on the Sandman, we get a very different ending. Sophie puts him to sleep and wishes him a good night's sleep. I couldn't kill him. He put up with so much for humans. He just wanted to sleep. How long will he sleep? Who knows? He was just up for centuries straight. Maybe he'll sleep for centuries too. I see. Maybe it was all that effort, but I feel sleepy now. Sophie collapses and mumbles about how she can't sleep now because she needs to save the humans or else they'll die. Lullaby assures her that no one will age or die while sleeping. She's thankful, and in her final moments of consciousness, she makes a promise for what she will do when she wakes up, like how she'll give Annie, her father, and Reagan a talking to and fix all their relationships, and try and be David's friend. Lullaby then shapeshifts into Sophie's mother and gives her last moments awake a peaceful send-off from her mother's words. Sophie falls asleep, presumably for centuries. Then we flash forward to the Sandman waking up, picking up Sophie and sending her back to her own bedroom. Then we can see the Sandman fixing time in the eternal sleeping sand. Sophie wakes up and sees her father. They have a fight, and Sophie says that he wouldn't know what she did at school because he never pays attention to her, and he's always at work. When was the last time they had dinner together or said goodnight to each other? Then she apologizes for her selfishness, leading him to overwork. Rushing out of the house and going to school, Sophie gets picked on by Reagan per usual. But she doesn't take it, and starts throwing her own insults back at her. She calls her a blubbering crybaby, and past this, it's difficult to tell who starts it, but they get into a fistfight with Reagan ending up on the floor. Sister Mary comes in and yells at them, but when she leaves, Sophie tells Reagan she won't be her sandbag, and if she makes fun of her or her mother's red hair, then she will pay it back 100-fold. However, she says if she's willing to be nicer, not bully people, they can be friends again, like the old times, as a sort of ultimatum. Next is Annie. As Sophie goes out in the hall, Annie says how Sophie was so mean to Reagan and how that was so harsh. Then Sophie rants about how Annie doesn't care. She only cares that she isn't the one being bullied. She's calling her a hypocrite for saying that she wants to help but not doing anything at all. She says she'd like them to stay friends, but interestingly, she actually calls herself a liar, because she had said she was fine and never needed help. An interesting twist, in my opinion, about how Sophie feels about this. Next, we see her get into a big argument with Sister Mary about how Sophie doesn't fit the idea of being a proper young lady, calling her a kid and not a saint. She berates her for not remembering her sermon on Job. Then Sophie lays out a speech about how she is no saint and doesn't want to be a saint. She just wants to be human. She then says how God doesn't watch over her, and she's not worried about it, because she knows that someone has been watching over her. Then she storms out. When she gets home, she learns her dad took the day off, and we also learn more about his behavior over the past few years. He says that he thought she hated him, and that she's in high school, so he knew she'd be changing and thought she'd be annoyed even though he wanted to be close to her. He asks for forgiveness, and then Sophie collapses into his arms, saying how she's sorry for saying such awful things and that she loves him. How she was scared to sleep in an empty house and of monsters in the closet begging him to stay. It's such a good, heartfelt moment, in my opinion. But we got more threads we need to end, so next is David. Sophie meets him and his fiancée, Shirley, and there's even a crooked neck joke. I won't say it. Then Sophie says how she wants to talk to him, and they don't seem too weirded out when she mentions the Sandman. Then when they leave, she throws up a peace sign, knowing the Sandman is watching. Happy ending. Don't stay up too late. Now here is the obligatory part where I have to show the credits, for legal reasons, because, of course. Now you may be wondering, why the hell is this video still so goddamn long? What kind of analysis is this? That's because there's even more to the game. An extra segment that is an hour long. Okay, I'm going to have to make this one much quicker just so this video doesn't end up too long. This expansion is technically the same story, just from the Sandman's perspective. It's cool, and I recommend playing the game for this, but basically it shows us how stressed the Sandman is and how he makes the sleeping sand in lullabies. Neat thing is how he refuses to go to sleep until absolutely everyone, including the Insomniacs, are peacefully asleep first. Not because he's evil or hates them, but because he wants them to have peace while he's asleep as well. So we go through this whole process of trying to help Sophie and then find out she can't understand the Sandman. So he gets a book on the English language and writes her that letter that we've seen earlier. Also, he yells at the unicorn for taking her gem, learning it's part of who she is as a person. Then the Sandman eventually falls in love with Sophie. Yeah, that's the rough gist of it. So let's wrap it up. I love this game. It was not the Crooked Man, and that is perfectly fine. This game is brimming with character and story, just like its sister games, but with its own personality. The Boogeyman and the Crooked Man are incredibly dark games, and they're amazing. This game was much more lighthearted, but still amazing tying the stories together. Let's start with the things I liked. I loved how creative and odd the story got. When Sophie learns how the dragon and the military guys are her fault because of her inner desires, it reminds me of that one cliche of genies: be careful what you wish for. Another thing is the environment. There's 3 main environments: the town, the dream world, and the Sandman's castle. But they feel so good to walk around in. The town area is so cool to explore. The only problem is how easy it is to get lost and not know where to go at first. The dream world is very nice, but also a little boring, but still an interesting idea. Then there's the Sandman's castle. I liked it. It was a pretty linear castle, but It was an interesting environment with a mixture of fantastical magic elements and futuristic machines. It's like a modded Minecraft base I would make. One of the major things I disliked is the translation glasses. Purely because for some reason you cannot pick up the notices with the glasses on. Do I shrink by a foot when I put on the glasses? It's dumb. However, the puzzles were good. The jewel one was a little confusing, but I thought it was really interesting. The sand making minigame was also really neat. One of my main problems with it is actually that these puzzles require you to either have a god tier memory or a notepad. The box hiding section was also really cool. I thought it was a cool stealth section for an MGS reference. I feel like the running and finding sections of Annie and the father segments were a bit more boring though. Also, that one puzzle of you having to go find the guy in the subway and then put in 120000 for the password still confuses me. Now, I want to go to the actual story and theme. I kind of like Sophie as a character. She has a stoic presence in the beginning. She reminds me of that one John Mulaney quote. "I'll put all of my feelings right here, and then one day, I'll die." She tries to bottle up all her feelings so that she doesn't have to deal with them. In the bad endings, we see what happens because of her emotional repression. She becomes spiteful and hateful of people. She cuts off relationships with others and then gets sick of people. She refuses to talk things out, but she's mad when nothing changes. Which, I mean, she is a teenage girl and very emotional throughout the whole story, but the moments from Sister Mary and her sermon on Job show the pressures pushed upon Sophie to cause her to bottle up all her emotions. The bad endings are honestly hard to watch. We see Sophie in many of the bad endings slowly becoming worse or a hypocrite. In one of the endings, where she kills the Sandman, she starts trying to justify her actions to avoid her own emotions. She uses the Sandman as a scapegoat for her own actions that she is completely in control of. The happy ending is the only ending I actually like, because it shows Sophie standing up for herself. But this game definitely is a little divisive for me. Not because of any controversy or how something affects me, but just because of Sophie's reactions and emotions. Sometimes her reactions seem so over the top and just don't make sense. Yes, it's established she has this belief that people need to suck it up and deal with life. But then she sits down with Dwarf and talks with him. But then she disregards everything others say and what she sees. She blames Sandman instead of herself. Which, it's not like that's unrealistic, but it is annoying. Annoying in a good way, kind of, because it makes me happier when I actually see her grow as a person. But the ideas of stoicism and what it means to grow up and to deal with your emotions is really interesting. Everyone deals with grief and their relationships in different ways. This story is a really interesting way about displaying the issues of bottling up your emotions and refusing to talk to others. It's a unique way of showing the story without explicitly saying it. Sandman's story also shows us an interesting story when it comes to overworking, well, not taking care of yourself. Dwarf shows it too, but these people are almost all the exact opposite of Sophie. They show what happens when you talk about your issues willingly, but instead of trying to rest or take a break, they continue on, knowing that they're not helping themselves. But they love it. It's an interesting dichotomy, and both stories show us two extremes of the same topic. Anyway, I've yammered for quite a while. If you like my recap on the Sandman, you should really play it. The Strange Man series goes on sale often, and I recommend any and all of the games in this series, especially since I didn't spoil all of this game. And I want to say, by the way, this was written before the ARG video was released, and you guys clearly loved that. Only 2 days after, it's already nearly reached the same amount of views as that one stupid Simpsons game video. Thank you guys so much for loving that one. And before I go to the written ending for this, I just want to say, again, thank you guys so much for 500, 600, and nearly 700 subscribers from what it looks like as of writing this anyway. And I hope you guys all enjoy my stuff. And for those of you who are newcomers or just watched the ARG video, I urge you to check out some of my other videos. If you want to find other ones similar to the ARG video, I recommend checking out my Mischief video, my Simpsons video, as much as I have a disdain for it, and my 2 Portal videos, as I think those are some of the highest quality written videos I've had so far. And again, for 500 and 600, please leave suggestions of any games you want me to see. I have a ton of games that are free in my Steam library that I've just backed up, So I'll also leave those on the table if I don't really see that many interesting. So I'll still leave those on the table for ideas that I can lead to a vote later. But seriously, if you have any suggestions, free games or ARGs or just anything you want me to cover, I'll consider them all. But that doesn't guarantee anything. I just want to say that. But as always, thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed. This was my second video on the Strange Man series, and I hope you guys check out the other one if you enjoyed this. And also, I hope you enjoyed this style of video. As always, comments, criticism, and suggestions, especially those ones, are always welcome. It's been me, Moosh, and I'll see you later. Arrivederci. Actually, I'm feeling a little groggy. I think I need a drink. Oh, that's pretty good. What is this? Ale. Shit. Oh. Well, this seems like a cozy place. Sneaking back to the ticket office, Raven... Damn it. Truth in the ways of the Lord, and endure your heart. Truth in the ways of the Lord. To lock the doors when we leave the stove off. That hostage being Raven. Damn it.